Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 16 of Plays Well with Others. As always, I am Andrew Moore, your host, and I am joined by my illustrious co-host, Jess Agnew. So, whatever you've done, if you've been with us for 15 episodes, if this is your first episode, welcome. But also, if you're here, go ahead and give us a like, a share, a rating, subscription, what have you, because it really does help. It helps us understand what you like, what you don't like, what's engaging for you. And that's at the end of the day what we want to do. We want to provide you some entertaining content that's maybe a little bit educational, maybe a little bit valuable for you, your career, your person going down the road. So wherever you are, as long as you're not driving, go ahead and pause this episode. We'll be here when you get back, and give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe so you hear all of the episodes as they come out wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube in sparkling 1080p. So I want to kick off this episode with just a little bit of I'll say kudos, but we actually got our first text review in Apple Podcasts, and I wanted to share some of this because I've said vehemently for all 15 episodes and now into the 16th that we're not a technology podcast, and that there's value here no matter what your role is or your particular bent. But we had one review that did feel very nice. It was a 5-star review, so go ahead and do the same, please. But it says, and I'm going to paraphrase in some places, but it says, "I'm not a developer, I am an entrepreneur. He doesn't work in tech, don't have a bunch of employees, small business owner. But I find the topics on this podcast to be incredibly thought-provoking. Process is process, whether you have a team of 100 or a team of 2. So thanks to Andrew and Jess for helping me think through my business and process in an incredibly helpful new way." So thank you, Gilderstein. I just want to use that opportunity to re-emphasize that because even though we talk about technology, that's just because that's where we live. We live in tech. Mm-hmm. A lot of these principles and a lot of these topics are valuable no matter what you do or what industry you're in. They
transcend. Yeah,
they absolutely do. So thank you, Gilderstein, for the glowing review, and hopefully that primes the pump for the rest of you out there listening to go ahead and leave us a review, or at least share with your friends, talk about us, whatever. We're big people. We can take it. So moving into our second segment of this episode, I want to set this up a little bit because this was Jess's idea a couple weeks back to do what most of you would be familiar with as a call-in show, like a radio show that you listen to on Saturday mornings. But because we record these at all hours of the day and night, dial-in shows probably not gonna work so well. But maybe we'll file that one away in the idea bank. But for now, what I'm going to introduce is a segment that I'm going to title Engaging Engagement. And the idea is we're going to dig into whether it's the reviews on the podcast, go do that, or if it's comments on LinkedIn, articles that we see, places that we see that interesting topics come out. And the first one we want to dig into is related to a post from Plays Well with Others. So it was on my LinkedIn, but it wound up getting featured in a LinkedIn business article about business lunches, or business lunches returning. We didn't talk about that. What we talked about was making sure that when you have people come back to the office, make sure that there's value there. And one of us made a passing comment that, if you're going to have everybody come back to the office, at least buy them lunch, right?
Yeah.
And that took off. It took off a lot. And there's a lot of opinions about buying lunch as it relates to returning to the office. And so how I want to structure this is we got 2 comments, and one of them I think is I'll call it a softball, and we can chat about that a little bit. But I want to get, Jess, your thoughts. I want to go back and forth a little bit on each of these comments. Going forward, listeners, leave comments on Jess's LinkedIn, my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you
YouTube,
happen to find
wherever.
us. YouTube. Yes, YouTube's a great one. Leave us those comments. You don't need to do any hashtags, anything like that. It's a very low bar. Just leave us a comment. Say hey, and
We
maybe
will
you'll
find
make
it
it
and
on
we
the
will read
next.
it.
Yeah, well, there's not many of them, so we'll definitely read it.
We will read it.
Yes. So if you leave us a comment, maybe you'll be featured on the next engaging engagement episode. And who knows when that'll be. So, Jess, the first comment is remembering this is on a post about buying lunch or returning to the office, and we'll call this return to work generically. But the comment is you don't have to go back to the office because employers can give you gift cards for restaurants. And I thought that was a strong response because
Yeah.
that's a real thing. Although where I live, I get that email a lot. We'll give you an Uber Eats coupon. It
They don't
doesn't
come
come
here.
this
They don't
far
come
out.
here. Yeah, most of us don't live where you live. I would love to get an Uber Eats gift card. Anyone's fine to send that to me. But okay, so a couple of things here. First one is in the context of that conversation, if you're going to make your employees return to the office, having incentives and having a meaning behind it is important. So I think for the context of what we were talking about, we were really saying if you're going to make them come in for some reason, you should have a good reason to do that. You should have an important meeting. You should have a whiteboarding session where people need to collaborate together and write out a board together. You should be meeting with a vendor. You should be having a team lunch to do team building. Like something should be, there should be a reason why that's happening. You shouldn't just arbitrarily say you should come to the office because you're more effective there. Because I think it's been proven over and over again that that's almost never the case. Second, though, I do agree that there are ways to team build and to appreciate your employees that don't involve face-to-face, in-person conversations, that don't involve them having to drive into the office. I've had actually a couple of different things that we've done at different companies to remotely engage, and they were all really fun. My husband's company sent out these little care packages. You selected what your favorite drink was, and you got in the mail a little box that had like a small bourbon, all of the stuff that you needed to build your own old fashioned was what my husband picked, right? So he made his own old fashioned right there. It had the instructions, it had all the ththings that he needed. All he needed was a cup.
It's an
That was
excellent
really
choice. Mm-hmm.
cool. Yeah, old fashions are fantastic, which is why he makes me buy my own when we go out now because I just used to steal his.
Been
But
there.
we we've also gotten, hey, let's we used to do morning meetings once a month, once a quarter, something in our last company. I'm forgetting what the name of it was now, but it was something like Coffee Talk. And so when we all went remote, Coffee Talk wasn't really a thing we could do. Or was it? Everyone got a Starbucks gift card and we could buy ourselves Starbucks before the meeting or really just any time and bring your own coffee to the meeting. But it was a nice way to kind of continue to stay engaged with your team and show appreciation in a small but meaningful way.
Yeah, I think we called it Coffee and Conversations.
Coffee and conversation. That's what it
What
was.
stuck with me is if you've ever watched Grand Tour, it's Conversation Street. So it strikes me as a public television segment, but the concept holds.
Yeah. Well, and I think everyone should acknowledge the great effort that I just put in of not saying coffee talk. So I just that was really frankly impressive level of self-control.
I'm pleased. I'm very pleased. But Jess, you too raise a good point. So the core of this, you could say buying lunch is a reason to come back to the office. Well, it's a causation correlation sort of issue, right? You've got to, first and foremost, to have people come back to an office, you got to have a good reason. You can't just say, come back to the office for lunch. Well, it's on a good day, maybe I could argue that.
Or something,
right.
maybe I could maybe get behind it if it's a team that you're trying to pull together in a certain way, maybe.
Agreed. And the interesting part there, though, that I hadn't really experienced at during the pandemic. Most of us at the company I was at the time all were from the area. We stayed in the area. But the company I'm at now, during pandemic, a lot of folks moved to the far-flung corners of the world, and you lost that ability to say come in for lunch, because in some of them it's a weird sort of challenge because they live like a 5-hour drive away. Okay, well, do you fly? Do you drive? And that just adds this extra complexity that wasn't there before. So you're 100% not saying come to the office because we're going to have a team building lunch. Like, that's just not worth the squeeze. But if you structure it in a way that says, you know what, we're gonna all get together. Some of us have never met each other face to face. We're gonna share a couple of meals together. We're going to whiteboard. We're gonna do a rah-rah session on strategy and the future, and we're going to get excited, and we're going to understand how we all fit together, and we're going to be in a room together brainstorming. That provides value. Lunch
that adds
doesn't.
A lot of value. Yeah, and the lunch is just a component of the overall interaction at that point. It's not the driving, reason that you're all coming together.
Right. So you've got to start first and foremost with defining why office. Why do we need to be here? And if you can't come up with an answer,
and if you can't come up with it and you and if you can't come up with it and you want to buy your team lunch, then the gift card is a fantastic idea. It's a wonderful way to appreciate your team without putting unnecessary stipulations in a place that might cause frustration or cause the adverse action from what you actually wanted to achieve.
Yeah, and just something for nothing. Look at buying gift cards for restaurant groups rather than specific restaurants, because
it's a good call.
There are places that don't have places, so give people options. I think we had a situation recently where we were raffling off, or somebody was going to win a Costco gift card, and there were a few people, we don't have a Costco.
Guess I won't enter. Right.
I don't have a Costco membership. So you use the gift card to buy the membership so that you can get into the Costco to spend the gift card. Right. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
So our next comment, same topic, similar topic, return to work. So we had someone reach out that said they had compared cost of living between two zip codes that I had to look up, but it was the New York, Manhattan metropolitan area and Greenville, South Carolina. And he found that buying lunch for employees to come to the office isn't a free lunch for those employees, but comes with what is effectively a 90% pay cut, because of the medium home value in Manhattan is 10 times that of Greensboro, North Carolina. I picked the wrong state, but point holds. And I'll just start with saying that's fairly obvious that living in Manhattan is going to be vastly more expensive than living just about anywhere else. But getting past me being pedantic, there's a good point there. So I mentioned earlier that in the current company, a lot of folks move to the far reaches of the world.
Yeah.
That's one aspect, right? So you're making the same amount and you move. Maybe that means you get a pay cut or you get a pay bonus. Is it one way or the other? Dollar goes a different distance everywhere you live. I had at another company, we had somebody move from New England down to Tennessee, effective pay bump, whether it be from less taxes or from lower cost of living or what have you. So,
although there are some of those states that are more expensive in secret ways, like the food's just really more expensive, or there's property taxes that are more expensive, like Florida or something.
Yes.
So I did, this is not always the case.
I will plug the site that this guy used was realtor.moving.com. So it's a subsidiary of realtor.com, but it allows you to put your zip codes in, and it gives you demo information. So population, what the makeup is, male, female, married, unmarried, separated, widowed, divorced, average household size, median age, gives you income information, gives you ethnicity, residential information.
That's
and there
actually
are other
really
services
cool.
out there. It really is. So if you want to move, you should probably check out realtor.moving.com. But there are
I've
other...
had more than one friend who's moved and been surprised by things that they didn't realize were going to be issues because they weren't in their previous state. It's like moving countries, but we're Americans, so we don't think of that, right? But it really is.
Yeah, and I'm gonna look it up while we're doing this, and it's making me a little bit nervous that I'm doing that. But there is another site that I've used in the past that really breaks down things like what's the cost of groceries. So we're gonna do okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know I was surprised when I visited certain places just how expensive a loaf of bread was.
Yeah, here it is. So it's nerdwallet.com has a cost of living calculator that gives you current city and new city, and you can put in your pre-tax household income. And it says to me, so with a pre-tax household income of $50,000, moving from San Francisco, California to Miami-Dade County, Florida, to maintain your standard of living in Miami-Dade, you'll need a household income of $32,025. So the cost of living is 36% lower in Miami-Dade than it is in San Francisco. And it breaks it down with housing costs, transportation costs, food costs, entertainment, healthcare, etc. So not sponsored, but NerdWallet hit me up. NerdWallet.com has a cost of living calculator. So back on topic. Now that we understand all of the tools available to us to understand cost of living, when it comes to returning to office, obviously you're not having somebody commute, right? If they, to borrow David's example, we're not commuting from Greensboro, North Carolina to Manhattan, New York. We're not. But if you're trying to balance ROI, again, you've got to go back to this idea of make sure there really is value there rather than having somebody get on a plane, fly into New York, which is probably its own pain, get to where you're going, which, this takes decades presumably to do. Have to get there, and then to make the ROI, well, I bought you lunch. It doesn't stack up.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more of evaluation that needs to go into remote teams before you pull everyone together for any specific purpose. And it is interesting too, because a lot of companies moved to a remote work environment and are now considering whether or not that's the best continued path. And what I think is maybe happening that maybe they don't think about is these people that they've had for 3 years that used to work in the office but now don't work in the office, saying, I'm going to switch you back to in office. To Andrew's point, they may have already moved. They have a new understanding of what their job is going to look like, and they've made choices in their personal life based on those decisions. So there's a little bit more thought that needs to go into, am I going to remove remote work other than just, can't just do it on a dime, I guess.
Right. And that it poses an interesting question. So if we move on from existing employees, existing colleagues, how do you bracket compensation for a role that's now 100% remote? And I've seen a bunch of different approaches to it, but the fact is, how we used to do things doesn't really make sense all the time for the new world. And it's leading to scenarios where, I don't know how real this is, but you see it on TikTok a lot. Developers that get paid developer salaries that, move to Bali or work from Southeast Asia for months on end because cost of living is much lower. And I can essentially go on vacation for free or work from a tropical island, which doesn't sound too bad.
Sand in the computer, it's a thing. No.
I mean, it probably is a serious issue.
I mean, there are going to be some companies that will have limitations on that, though, with just like firewalls and permissions to different companies based on where what you're doing. So it doesn't always work, but it is kind of an interesting.
Well, as a thought experiment, right. As a thought experiment, it does pose an interesting question. if I hire a developer in Idaho, that developer's salary expectations are going to be vastly lower than you hire a developer in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important, and I'm not going to get into the HR regulatory requirements because I don't know them all, but
Yeah.
it is important as a hiring manager to understand, like, people living in different places have different needs. And
Yeah.
I've been asked by recruiters in the past, what do you need to make to pay your bills? Or like, what we want you to be comfortable. Well,
Yeah.
that's not really what we're after here, is it? Like, I want to be paid what
Rather-
I'm worth, not
Yeah.
what I need to survive.
Bare minimum to live, which, not gonna lie, the first time I got that salary, I was pretty excited to get the bare minimum I needed to survive.
Oh,
But
yeah.
there's also that side of what are you actually worth, and that should be what you're valued on. But
And that's where, when it comes to compensation, it comes to job postings, and this is still related to David's comment about moving between areas. Going into an office, knowing that it's not a specific requirement in most cases, you've got to take into consideration where people are, and then act accordingly. So, don't definitely don't choose somebody to work for you because of where they live. Don't do that. But on the same token, understand that different people have different requirements, and that's likely going to be impacted by where they are in the country or where they are in the world.
And there are a lot of places I could work locally, but local for me means probably a 45-minute drive in the morning, maybe an hour and a half with traffic on the way home, because I would be headed towards Nashville, and that's always a tragedy when you're headed towards Nashville from a traffic perspective. And I don't even live in the highest traffic area by far that we have in this country. So, you start talking about going into an office, you're not just talking about living in a place where your money may not go as far. You're also talking about the additional strain on your time because you have to drive in traffic, and your mental health, dealing with traffic every day.
I
I
realized.
spent 6 years making that drive, and it was a lot.
Yeah, I realized I live about 40 miles away from my old office, and I just happened to look at the Google Maps directions. It gives you the ETA, and 90% of the trip took 10% of the time.
Yeah.
So I could get all the way to town very quickly, and like,
But Brentwood.
yes, and then you get into town and you just sit there. So when you look down, it's not even the red; it's the red and black. Like, yep, you're not going anywhere.
It's the one
Get
that's like,
comfortable.
you live here now. Don't even worry about it.
Right.
This is your new residence. Just you live here now.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap up that segment there. I really want to hear what you think. Do you like the engaging with engagement segment? If you do,
Give
go
us
ahead
some
and leave
comments
us.
so we can engage.
Right, and I promise you, we will cover them in some fashion, and we'll make sure that we have some entertaining responses to your engagement. So, coming into the end of the episode, I wanted to introduce something else, because one of my passions is helping people in some way. I think it fits both of us. So, what I've always found interesting is learning about new creators, learning about people that are doing something new or doing something difficult. And I wanted to take a few minutes for Jess and I to both share what we're listening to or what we're watching or what we're reading, and hopefully that gives you something to consume, or gives, with our vast reach, gives some leg up to some other folks. But I'll go ahead and start off. And this it's important to me, or this guy's important to me, because basically his content and knowing him as a person taught me everything I know about audio production and how to do stuff right, and how to really produce things. And that's Joe Gilder. May or may not have anything to do with the review that we read on iTunes, but So he's got a couple of different places. He's over on YouTube under Joe Gilder. He's got homestudiocorner.com. All of his content is focused on how to produce audio at home and do it really well, and to produce studio quality content without having to go to Blackbird or RCA. And if you go listen to any of his podcasts, he's got the Home Studio Corner podcast that I don't believe is still active, but the episodes are all still out there. If you go to his website, he's got courses that he sells and gives away, and has a lot of good info there. It's really valuable, especially if you're getting into podcasting, if you're getting into music production of any sort. He's got a lot of key takeaways that range from, high level conceptual down to boots on the ground. Where do I put a microphone to make it sound good? All of that's really, really excellent. So check out Joe over at homestudiocorner.com.
Is he why your lighting is so good? Is that...
No,
or is that, it's the audio.
No, I had to struggle through lighting, and I'm still not great at it. But I'll give another shout out for free. So Spencer Holloman is marketing director, VP of marketing over at Evidence Care, and I've known him for a lot of years too. But he does a lot of videography. He produces really good content. So I aspire to have lighting as good as Spencer throws up there. But Jess, I've talked enough. I've shouted out enough. What are you listening to? What are you reading?
So I read a book actually a little while ago, but it's one of those books that's just kind of like stuck with me, and I think I'm going to go reread it probably directly after we get off of here. It's called The Infinite Game, and it's written by a person that you all might already be familiar with. He's very famous. He does not require our shout out at all, but it is what is kind of on my mind right now. His name's Simon Sinek, I think is how you pronounce his name. I apologize if I am mispronouncing that. I have only ever read it up to this point. He's on like TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn and all those different places. Fantastic thoughts on being a leader, and some of the parallel conversations that Andrew and I are having here, he's diving even deeper into and writing incredible books about them. The Infinite Game is, I think it's kind of I don't want to say a criticism, but a valid assessment of America's corporate environment and how companies are looking at, how do we win? How are we the best price? How are we the lowest price? How are we the lowest rate? And they're playing a game that is a finite game, but a finite game has rules and a winner and a loser and a defining endpoint. And so they're missing the mark, because what they actually should be doing is playing the infinite game, which doesn't have a defined competitor. It's time as the competitor. Can you survive? And are you looking at your company in terms of, how can I be agile to adjust to change as I need? How am I looking to the future and being, someone who's making waves within the industry? How can I be diversified enough that if something unpredictable happens, I have other lines within my company that I can build up and invest in to keep ourselves afloat? And he talks a lot about not just doing that as a company perspective, but how to be a leader and help drive change within the organization. He's the one who talks a lot about mission statements and what are you doing? Why are you investing into a company? Why are you doing what you do? He's a fantastic writer, and the book, I can't recommend it highly enough. I really enjoyed it.
Well, so as a teaser, and because I'm genuinely curious, does a business playing the infinite game give that business a leg up against the competition, or does this require vast cultural change in order to take advantage of it?
So he uses an example in the book of Blockbuster, right? And how Blockbuster was top dog. They had, all the business for getting movies. You might have had a couple local places, but Blockbuster was where you went. It was the term was synonymous with the activity. And then enter Netflix, and Blockbuster had an opportunity to shift their business. They had an opportunity to be agile and move into it, but they were so focused on winning that they kept playing the same game over and over again, kept lowering prices or trying to compete in the way that they had always competed. And Netflix blew that out of the water because they weren't playing the same game. They were coming in with a different mindset. And so when you say infinite game versus finite game, it's a smaller context to what I think the book actually touches on. But that concept of looking to the future, you're not fighting against another company. You're not the best. You're not looking to be the best. You're not looking to be the lowest price. You're looking for, how can I continue to be relevant in the industry forever?
Yeah, and that's actually a good plug for our last episode, talking about perception and how your perception of yourself and others impacts your overall success, your feelings of success, and your general longevity. How do you keep yourself from burning out? You align what you do with what works and what fits with your goals, and you have to constantly be reevaluating that.
And I think it's a testament to this book that I read this a while ago, like a good long while ago. It has just really stuck with me, and I've been looking for it to pick it back up because I want to read it again. I think I would get more out of it even on the second read because I have been thinking about these concepts for so long now.
All right, so what we'll do, Jess, if you'll text me a Amazon link to the book, we'll put that down in the show notes. I'll also put links to Home Studio Corner, to Joe Gilder's YouTube, and Spencer Holloman as well. He's got a lot of good content, and that's going to lead you down a rabbit hole of content, and that's kind of the idea. We want to build this community.
It'll lead you right back here, right?
Well, it needs to ultimately, because you need to come back next week and get the next round of shout outs and next round of content that'll get you through to the next episode. So as always, this has been Plays Well with Others. I'm Andrew Moore, joined by Jess Agnew, episode 16. Go ahead, give us a like, share, rating, subscription, etc., etc., etc. And until next time, thanks for listening.